This is just an introduction to the power of Power Query. It is amazing and you're going to love it, I hope. So I'm going to start off by showing you some files. So if I literally start looking at the January 22 file, so this is a file that I have with some sales data in. So if I just open that and show you what the data looks like, just a handful of columns. We've got the region, the sales rep, the product name, the date of the sale and the quantity of the sale. Okay, so we're going to use Power Query to consolidate this information. You'll also notice that at the moment this data doesn't have any data related to prices, but we do have another file. So again, if I just go to open, I can find another file in there, which is product data. So if I open this one, you'll see this gives me, well, we've got a table set up there for each of the 3 products, what the product code is for each of them, and what the individual unit price is. So usually what you'd find in a normal spreadsheet is we'd have to have a VLOOKUP column in here where we'd look up the individual price to that other file for each of these items. And that would be a formula that we'd need to maintain in this file and then in any other file for the rest of the year. So we're going to use Power Query to not need to do all of that. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to close both of these files down because Power Query insists on the files being closed. I'm going to go to a new blank workbook. So whole empty sheet, I'm going to start off by setting the connection. So in the data ribbon, we have this section here, Get and Transform, and this is all your Power Query dreams come true, essentially, in here. So if I go to Get Data, we have all of these different ways that we can connect the file. So if I start with From File, in there we get even more options. So we've got from Workbook, from a text file, from an XML file, from a JSON file, from a PDF even, which is amazing. So I'm literally going to stick with an Excel workbook today because we've just seen that January file. But we could also link to a SQL database, Access database, all of these different databases. You've got Azure, you've got Power Platforms, Power BI, online, SharePoint, Dynamics, Salesforce, and then other sources. So yeah, all kinds. So you're pretty much unlimited. So I'm going to stick with the easy one, From File. So hang on a second, From File, from an Excel file. We then get the normal Browse button where we can navigate to the file that we want. So I'm going to link it to this individual file and I'll click Import. Okay, so the next thing is it tries to connect to that file and it gives me a list now of all of the sheets or tables that it finds within that file, and we can select which table or sheet to use. Now there's only one, so if I select that one, it then gives me a preview. Let me move my head out of the way. It gives me a preview of what that looks like, so we can, if you've got lots of sheets, you can confirm that you're on the right one, and we then click Transform Data. Okay, this then opens up the Power Query editor screen. So what you'll notice is we've got 2 sheets open. We've got the Excel file and we've got the Power Query editor screen. You can't navigate back to your spreadsheet or do anything within your spreadsheet while your Power Query editor screen is open. It's very picky. Also, the Power Query editor can't refresh or update anything if the source files it's linked to are open as well. So you've got to be careful with those little provisos. Okay. So this is Power Query Editor. So we're done with our connection step. We're now onto the transformation step, because what it's done is it's pulled in, these are all the columns of data it's found. We can see if we move across to the right, there they all are, there's all the columns. What we can now do is transform it to show the relevant data that we need. So what I want to show you as well is on the left hand side is a list of the queries. We only have one. The query's been named after the name of the sheet or the table that we've used. We can edit that by either right clicking and doing rename, or we could use this box here in the query settings and we could literally just type into that box and overwrite that name if we wanted to. So this is on the left is all of your queries, on the right are your query settings, and what you'll notice is there's a list of applied steps. So far, these are the steps that have been applied to create this data so far. So in the middle is your data as it stands. And the beauty of Power Query, unlike in a normal spreadsheet where you just see the end result of all the formulas calculated, this allows us to step through and see the data at the different stages. So if I literally go back to the source step and so click on the step of source, you'll see that's what the data looked like at that point, because, and it shows us the code here, and this is using the language of M. So it's a whole new language to learn. But the beauty of Power Query is you don't have to learn that because it applies all that code as we click buttons, thankfully. So if I just expand this screen so we can see this a bit bigger, we can see we've linked to an Excel workbook, and this is the whole file directory and the name of the file, or this is the name of the file there, where it lives. So this just tells us where it is at any point. So that's the source, that tells us what the file is. And at this point it tells us in that file it's been able to find one sheet, which is a sheet, and a table. So we've got a table as well. So they're the options we have. We then have the navigation step where we select that we wanted to use the sheet called data, and then this is the data it's found at that point. And you'll notice that on row 1 there, it shows us region, sales, rep, product. So they're the headings. The next step is to promote those headings into, instead of saying column 1, column 2, if we just click on the next step, you'll see the columns are now called region, sales, rep, product, etc. And then the next step is change type. And again, this starts looking really complicated, but the red text indicates the name of the column, and then just after it, it tells us what data type has been applied. So the data type can also be distinguished by, in the very top left of the header row. So we can see that has been formatted as text, that one's text, and again, you can see type text there, type text. We can see that date has been type date, and we can see that's indicated there by the little calendar. Okay, now if we want to overwrite any of those, we could literally click on that little symbol and we get the list of options. So we can very easily amend or adapt any of these types as we want to. But actually that's a date, that's a value, a quantity, that's right. What we then have is columns 6, 7, 8, 9, they're all empty, which really they're kind of irrelevant. So the beauty now of Power Query is that we can transform the data and say, actually, column 6, so I've literally clicked on column 6, hold down shift on your keyboard and select column 9. So I've now selected all of those columns. In the home ribbon here, I can just select remove columns. There's a bottom half of that button as well. So if I click the bottom half, you can see we can remove the columns I've selected or the other columns. So again, it makes it easier if you've only you wanted to keep 2 columns out of 100, you don't have to select the other 98. So here I'm just going to do remove columns because they're the ones I wanted to remove. Okay, so there's lots of other things we can do to transform this data. I'm just going to put myself over here, I think. So we can transform this data in lots of different ways. I think there's some typos in those regions. So we've got southeasts instead of southeast. So what we could do is select the region column. And then in the home ribbon again, we can replace values. So I can literally click on there. It says value to find. So what was it? Southeasts. Yeah, so I can type in there southeasts. I'm not typing in the box, hold on. Southeasts. And I can replace that with, paste that in and just do southeast. Now, what we could also do is on advanced options is to match the entire cell contents, because where it already said southeast, it's going to upset things. So I could just replace that. Okay, so now they all look pretty good, don't they? Oh, no, we've got East Mid instead of East Midlands. So again, we can replace values and we can say do East Mid and replace with East Midlands. And again, we will match the entire cell contents. There'll be occasions where you don't need to do that as well. Okay. Now, have you noticed as well, as I'm doing this, we're getting some new steps applied. So we've got this step here, which is where it will remove the column. And we can see there that it's column 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we can amend this at any point if we wanted to. That's the replace values with the southeast. And that is, again, the East Midlands replacement. Okay. I think as well we've got an issue with Sarah there. So we need a H on the end of Sarah. So again, I'm going to select that column. I'm going to do replace values. Going to replace Sarah with Sarah with a H on the end. And again, I'll do match entire cell contents. Fab. Okay. You can't really see it right now, but I know that there's random spaces at the end of the product names as well, so that's going to upset things. So if I select that product column, I can go to the transform ribbon and I can do format. And here you can transform text to lowercase, uppercase, capitalize each word, do all these amazing things with it. I'm going to do trim, which will remove any irrelevant spaces. So that's that done. So this data is now looking pretty good. Another brilliant thing we can do with dates in Power Query is I can select that date column. In the transform column, you'll see there's a date option. So if I click on date, I could then choose a year. And there I could get it to display the year. Now, interestingly, let me just show you what happens when I do this. So it's taken the date column and it's transformed it into the year. So it's basically removed the individual dates and the months, which probably isn't what we needed to do. But the beauty of Power Query is that if we didn't want that to happen, we could literally just delete the step. So I can delete that step and there comes my date again. So the brilliant thing about Power Query is that everything's undoable, if you like, and you can see it's always worth having a go and going, does that do what I want? Oh no, remove that again. And it's brilliant. In the transform ribbon, that's where it's taken the existing column and it's transformed it into something else. If we want to keep the existing column but have an additional column, then we need the add column ribbon. So in add column, you'll see we get exactly the same date field with exactly the same date options, and I can choose their year and choose year, and you'll see that the original date column stays and we get a new column for the actual year, which is brilliant. I could also go back to that date column and I could add a month, and you can see here we get the options of add the month, the start of the month, the end of the month, the number of days in the month, or the name of the month. So I'm going to go for name because that's kind of cute, isn't it? If we scroll across the end there's our month name. So it just helps the data look a bit clearer. And again, we've got the original date column there. At this point, we could remove that. And again, this is different to how you're used to using normal spreadsheets, because if we'd removed the date field that a formula had been using, it would upset any future formulas. But the way Power Query works, you can remove things after they've served their purpose, if you like, which is fab. Okay, so I'm going to leave that in there for now, but essentially what we've done there is we've transformed that data into what we need. The next thing I'm going to do though, is do you remember at the beginning I said that this data has just the quantities, it doesn't have any pricing? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to pull in the pricing from that other file which is called product data. Usually, again, in a normal spreadsheet, this is where we do a VLOOKUP formula. And it bugged me for a long time that I couldn't find VLOOKUP in the Power Query editor. And there's a reason for that, and it's because it's a different function altogether. So it works slightly differently. So if you're ever looking for the VLOOKUP, this is the function you need, and it's called merge. So if I go to the home ribbon, it's there, it's merge queries. But we can only merge queries, which means we have one query here with our data, so we're going to have to import the data and create another query linked to the product data, okay, before we can merge it. So in the home ribbon there, I can go to new source, link it to a file, an Excel workbook. This is exactly what we got from direct from the spreadsheet itself. So here it takes me back to browse and find the file. So this is the file I want to link it to, product data, and I'll click import. And then it gives me the navigator, it gives me the tables and the sheets that it's found, so I can select the table, say, and that's a view of what it looks like, so I can click OK. And it will process query, and eventually you can see there's a new query appeared here, and it's called product data, and that is the table. And you'll see the steps. We've got the source, which is the name of the file and where it lives. We've got the navigation, where we've selected the table called product data, and then it's changed the types, the data types for the columns. So we've got the product is text, the product code is a number, and the price is a number. So we don't really need to do any more to that. That's brilliant. What we can now do is go back to our original data query, and we can now merge, let me just collapse that a little bit, we can now merge the data in the product data. Okay, so to do that, I've selected our data query, I'm going to go into merge queries, and it gives me a table. So it starts with the data table because that's the table that I was in, and we can select which column, because this is like a preview of the query. So I want to match the data in the product column, and then down here we select the second query we want to link it to. So I want to link it to the query called product data. And again, we have to match the column in product data that is going to match. So I've selected these two columns together. And what you'll see here at the bottom is it gives me a green tick and says the selection that we've chosen matches 10 out of 10 rows. Yay! So we know this is going to work. So if I click OK, you'll see we've got a new step there called merge queries, and you'll notice it gives us this new column, which is rubbish actually. It just says table, doesn't give us any information. But if we click on this little cursor at the top right, if we click on there, it will expand or give us the option of selecting the fields to pull in from the product data query. So as we know, there's only 3 columns in there. I don't need the product name because we've already got it. I'll have product codes, please. I'll pull in the prices. There's a little tick box here. This is normally default. It says use the original column name as prefix. So essentially what this will do is it'll call it product data underscore product codes and product data underscore prices, which for me is a bit irrelevant. Let me just click OK and show you how awful it looks. Okay, so we've got our 2 new columns there, product data dot product codes, product data dot prices. If at that point you go, oh, we don't really want that, again, we could click on the little cog alongside that step and we can amend the step, which takes us back to this where we can select which columns we need, and it confirms what the default column name was. So I can just delete that at this point and click OK. And now the query just pulls in the actual column names itself, which is fab. And this is a brilliant thing about the Power Query, is that we can go back into any of these steps and just amend. So if I click onto that cog there, I could go and amend the text to replace. And you can do that with any of these steps. You go back and delete. It's just brilliant. Okay, so if I go back to this last step, we'll see we've got our lovely new columns now with the product code and the prices. I could also now, so we know we've got the quantity column. Just let me move me out of the way slightly. So we've got the quantity, so we know we sold 181 of those, and we know that the individual unit price is 100. So what we could do is include a new column now with a formula which will tell us what the total sales value was. So in there, I'm going to do an add column, I'm going to do a custom column, which gives us this box to type in the M code formula, and this is the tricky bit, but there's lots of help, okay? So we need to give it a column name, so I'm going to call it sales value. Okay, and then in here, we enter the formula. And it gives us the available columns, so I know my formula is literally just going to be quantity, so I can just double click the column name and it pops it in there in the square brackets. So I've put quantity, and then we're going to do a multiply by, and then scroll to the bottom and multiply by the prices. And double click that one, and that's it. And it gives you clues at the bottom as well, so it gives me a green tick to say there's no errors, so yay, this one should work again. If I messed something up, or for example I didn't have that bracket on the end, can I delete that? No, I can't. But it would kind of give you clues. You can also click here to learn about Power Query formulas and get more information as well. But for now this is going to work, so if I click OK, we'll see there's our new column with our sales value, and it automatically calculates. So the beauty of doing this is that all of these rules and all these conditions and all this transformation we've just done in the back end of Power Query, which means we can now, if we go back to home, we can now just close and load using this button here. We can close and load the data into Excel, either into a table, a pivot table, or a pivot chart. Just before I do that though, I just want to confirm that the all of these steps here have been, that's the transform step. The merge queries, that's the bit where I've done the combine, and so I've basically been able to combine 2 separate queries. I'm sorry I didn't make that one clear as I was doing that. The 4th step is to close and load, so we load the data once we finish transforming it. So close and load has top and a bottom half. Top half just close and load to the default option, which is usually a table, but if you do close and load, it gives you 2 options. We can either do close and load, same as the top, or we can do close and load 2. So if I do close and load 2, it takes us back to the spreadsheet, but then gives us this little screen here. So we can either import the data as a table, as a pivot table report, or as a pivot chart, or we could just create a connection. Okay, so I'm going to show you both. So I'm going to load our data into a table. So if I click OK, oh, as well we get where do we put it, either an existing sheet or this sheet. So just be careful where you put it in case you're going to overwrite stuff. If I click OK to that, you'll then see this is the data query. Oh no, it's not. So this sheet here is the product data. Let me just put myself back over here. So we've got the sheet we're currently on is called product data, which is linked to the product data query, which is this table of the product data information. Now, I'm not really wanting to see that information on a regular basis. It's only really been loaded into this query so that we could merge it into the data. So what I could do, I can now right click on this query, and I have to move myself out of the way again. If I right click on the query, I can choose load to, and I can change the option. So it's currently loaded as a table, as we can see, but I'm going to link it to only create a connection, which means it appears as a query in the list and it will still maintain its connection to the data query, but it won't load as a separate sheet because I don't need to see it. So if I click OK, you'll see it warns me, it's going to take it out of this sheet. Say, okay, that's fine. So this sheet's now empty, so I can actually right click and delete that sheet. Fab. And you'll see that the query there, product data, says connection only. Okay, so it tells you it's there, but don't be looking for it on the sheet, it's not anywhere. This sheet we're in now is called data, and this is linked to the data query, of course. We can rename these sheets if we need to, but this is literally the data loaded as per it's been generated from the query. So of course, the data that was in our original sheet was just columns A to E. We've added all these extra columns of all that value, okay, which is fab. So we can now do whatever we want with that. We can add more formulas into that. We can format this data. We could link this into pivot tables and do all kinds of analysis on it if we wanted. Now the difficulty with this and what we've done there is I've linked that, that query into one individual file. Okay, and it may well be that, in fact, let me just show you this because this is the case. I have a folder called monthly data, and as you can see, I've got one of those sales files for every individual month. Now, what I don't really want to have to do is I don't want to have to set up an individual query for every individual month and then potentially have to append them into one big query. So what we can do instead, and I'm just going to show you this, is I go to Data Ribbon, Get Data, From File. So instead of linking to an Excel workbook, I can actually link to an Excel folder, well, not an Excel folder, sorry, a folder of whatever data's in there. So I can connect to a folder. So now it gives me, if I just go up a level, you can see it gives me the folder structure. So if I link it to the folder called monthly data, I can click open. And then this works ever so slightly differently than it does if you link to a direct sheet. So that's why I'm just going to show you the difference. So this now gives me, these are all the files it's found in that folder. So I'm going to say, okay, fab, I'm going to transform that data from this point. So click transform. It then loads the query in the Power Query editor, and you'll see this has now become a third query. It's called monthly data because that's the name of the folder it's linking to. And you can see this currently only has one step, and that step is literally telling us where the folder lives. And at this point, it's brought through all of the different files. If I click on, in the content, you've got the two arrows there. If I click on that little icon, it will expand the data from each of those files. Okay, but this kind of goes into the navigator as well. Has that done it? Come on. Okay, so it's now going to go to the navigator. And what it does is it uses the very first file that it found, which would have been, in this instance, the April file, okay? But on the basis that these files are all the same, it's all the same structure, it doesn't matter which file it uses. So in that first file, these are the sheets or the tables it's found, and it wants to know which one to base the data on. So I'm going to link it to the data, and I'll click OK. Okay, so this is the data it's pulled in. Click OK to that. It takes its little time, so it's processing the queries from all of the sheets. And what you'll notice is it pulls in a load of helper queries over here on the right. So I'm just going to close that for the time being because it looks confusing. If I go back to the monthly data, you'll see it's now pulled in all of the information from all of the files. You can see there's April, there's August, let me shove me out the way. There's December at the bottom. If we click on the filter there, you can see that all of the files have been pulled in for the 12 months. Okay, which is quite cool. Also, when we look at these applied steps, so we've got the source, which is the folder, and then we've got all of these other steps, and these are the steps that are applied from those helpers on the left. So this basically pulls in all of the relevant information. So until we get down to change type, where you can see it's taken each of the columns and it's applied the data type. Okay, so that's where we're at now. So that's where we're starting with this data. So we can apply all the same transformation that we did on the other one. So let's go into the product column, and then let's go to transform and format and do trim to remove any irrelevant spaces. I think I tidied up all these regions. Let me just move me out the way. So yeah, they all look normal. Just because you've seen me change all of those, I don't need to change any of those either. Okay, so I think we're probably in a good place now. At this point, it's probably useful just to let's go straight and merge the data with the product data. So it doesn't matter which column we're in. I can go to the home ribbon, in merge queries. I can say this is my table, monthly data, link the product column to the product data query and connect the product. And again, it shows me the selection matches 119 and 120. Oh, so one hasn't worked. Okay, if I click OK there. The reason one hasn't worked, and I remembered this now, is if I look at this list of products, you can see that, let me just move me out the way again. We can see that one is called product. Okay, so I'm just going to go up a step. I'm going to go up to the trim text, and then I am going to replace values in that column. And it says, oh, do you want to insert a step here? Yes, please. And I want to find product, and I want to replace with product. Now in this instance, I'm not going to click match entire cell contents because it's always going to be followed by A, B or C. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that blank and click OK. So what you'll notice now is this step has appeared here as replace value before the merge. So now when we click on merge, if I click on this little cog, it will go back into the step, and I can click this button to refresh, and this will show me that it's now matched 120 of 120 rows. Okay, so that's fab. If I click OK to that, we should now see there's our product data. I can expand that by just including, let's just pull in the prices and don't use the original column. So now we have an extra column for the prices, and we can go back into add column, we can do a custom column, and I can include a column called sales value, and the formula would be the quantity multiplied by the prices, and click OK. Fab. So we're now in a position where we can do close and load to this one, and the beauty of this is that this one now includes data for the whole year. We've got all the months in 2022. Okay, and the beauty of it is, let me just move me out the way. The beauty of it is now that let's say I went into, oh, I'm so in the way. If we look here, I've got a file called January 2023. So if I could take a copy of that and I drop it into this folder, so if I paste that in, there it is. What happens now, if I just cancel that, what happens now is if I, in the data ribbon, click refresh all, this query will refresh, and that query, don't forget, is linked directly to the folder. So it's going to pull in any files that it finds in that folder. So currently it's found 120 rows. When I click refresh, you'll see that, if I just do refresh, you'll see that the query spins. It's finished spinning, which means it's all loaded, and there's 130 rows of data. If I just click on the filter there, you can see it now includes January 2023. And this is a real beauty of Power Query when you've got lots of data you're trying to merge, and if it's from different places like we have with the product data. Another brilliant thing is the product data. We know this prices column comes from that field, and we know that that's currently saying that product day is a price of 70. Now if I just open that product data and I was to amend that price to 170, if I save and close that file, and again, if I just do refresh all, you'll see the product data refreshes, and all the product days are now 170, which is also increased the sales value. And the beauty of that is I haven't had to amend any formulas on this sheet. There's no risk of forgetting to include one or pull down the range or anything like that. It just makes it super, super simple. So I hope that's a good insight for you into the world of Power Query, and please do start exploring it. It is